Hi, so now that we created our first app, we're going to actually create a CRUD. Uh, so as I mentioned, you've been hearing CRUD. CRUDs are the primary executables within this environment. Just as say on a PHP system, you have PHP files. On the CRUD web application builder, you have CRUDs. That's how you write executable logic. There are different types of CRUDs, and as we go through different lessons, I will introduce those. So we have our new app, and as we tested previously, as you can see, it loads up in the browser. Right now, this is just a plain HTML page. So we're going to create a velocity template, which is different from an HTML page in the sense that you can include scripts in there and you can reference properties. So let's create the velocity template, which is a CRUD. First, we'll create a category to hold this new CRUD. So let's call this first CRUD category. And then we're going to create the CRUD. We'll call it index. And the CRUD type that we're creating, as you can see, is script executor. That's for creating any kind of executable logic. So whether it's Groovy scripts, or in this case, it's going to be velocity scripts. So we'll call it index and make it a velocity template file, and then you create it. We'll open this up, and we're going to take the HTML file for our application, the index.html file. We'll just copy all that HTML and paste it into the velocity template. And then we're going to save it. When you save a script like this or any other CRUD, it will be baked. Baking a CRUD basically just means that it's converted from this view into an executable format so that the CRUD execution engine can actually run it. But before we can actually test this, we need to check the security tab. By default, CRUDs are not accessible through the browser. In other words, you cannot take the URL of a CRUD and put it in the browser and run it until you uncheck this. This is a security measure. So every new CRUD that you create, if you plan on exposing that CRUD to the browser, you have to uncheck that. When you build your application, the vast majority of the CRUDs are not going to be directly accessible to the user. You'll have a few that are entry point CRUDs, and for those, you'll need to uncheck this box. So now we have our CRUD. You can also manually bake a CRUD, so you right-click on it and say bake. And again, all this does is convert this view that you're looking at into something executable. So let's come back here, and we're going to say first CRUD, and then index.ste. That's the extension for script executor CRUD types. The different types of CRUD, there are about 6 CRUD types. They all have different extensions. So if you look on the file system, that's how you'll be able to tell which CRUD type you're looking at. So it's a script executor ends in .ste. Let's try to run that. And as you can see, it shows us the similar view as the HTML file. The difference here is, as you can see, the presentation is messed up. That's because it's in this directory here, the first CRUD directory, and so all the relative references to CSS and JavaScript files are broken. We can fix that by moving this over to the base directory so that it's in the same directory as the index.html file. And when you do that, the references that were earlier in the HTML file will be resolved correctly. So let's move that and then bake it. And now we can come and test it. Of course, we have to remove the reference to first CRUD because it's not in there anymore. And you hit go. And as you can see, it comes out nicely now. So this is now a template. You can do Google for a velocity templating engine and find out what the syntax is. But it's just like any other templating engine, you can embed code in it and reference data objects to make to present data. So that's you just looked at your first CRUD. You created your first CRUD. It's a script executable CRUD. There are different types. Again, as we go through the lessons, I'll present these CRUD types and discuss what they stand for. As you see from the view here, you have your pre-execution tab, your execution tab, and your post-execution tab, security tab, and parameter and validation tab. That basically together constitute the structure of a CRUD. Before running this, you can specify things to happen before this template is executed. You can specify things that you want happening after. You can specify security restrictions, and you can do validation and parameterization. We'll get into details in different sections of this of the video casting lessons. You can also look at the documentation, which is pretty good. It covers in detail what the CRUD structure looks like. But this is the core of your CRUD. So we tested the CRUD by typing the URL directly, but you can actually just right-click on the CRUD and say test. It'll bring up a test view, and you have an option as to what the output should be. If you select text and you say click run, it will actually run the CRUD, and here you're seeing the HTML output. Of course, this is HTML, so what we really want is for it to be outputted to an HTML page, and you can click go. It'll open that up an HTML page. As you can see, it open up a new tab and run it. So this is how you test CRUDs. Very straightforward. All the different types of CRUDs can be tested. You can provide parameters here, as you can see. So you have a simulate and a run button. The key difference between them is that when you do simulate, it will create a new instance of the target application's execution engine, and then test your CRUD in the context of that new instance of the engine. Whereas when you do run, it assumes that the application is already running at some URL, and it will invoke that URL. Okay, again, you should look at the documentation. It will tell you how to set those different URLs and settings. But you just saw your first CRUD and your first CRUD example, and in the next lessons we'll get into more details. Thank you very much.